So, what is a coming-of-age novel exactly? How is it defined? It's a novel which recounts the youth and young manhood, or womanhood, of a sensitive protagonist who is attempting to learn the nature of the world, discover its meaning and pattern, and acquire a philosophy of life. But in the 1930s, there wasn't an established tradition in this genre for writers targeting adolescent readers. Looking back now, it seems incredible that American publishing failed to formally recognize that young adult readers would need or want books written specifically for them as they themselves came of age. These readers needed books about a young adult protagonist struggling with adult issues for young adult readers. It seems so natural and inevitable to us today. But when Wilder was writing By the Shores of Silver Lake, this idea was new and largely untried, at least for adolescent readers. And had she listened to Lane, the final books in the Little House series would have been dramatically different and far less mature and satisfying. But maintaining Laura as the main character in By the Shores of Silver Lake and building a novel around the adult stuff in her world was only half of Wilder's battle. Lane also had serious doubts about the single event that forever changed both the real and the fictional Ingalls family saga: Mary's blindness. Wilder fought to keep this plot point in the novel. I can't take Mary along in the story as she should be if she were not blind. A touch of tragedy makes the story truer to life, and showing the way we took it illustrates the spirit of the frontier. I want to digress just a moment to discuss Mary's blindness, both the fictional case and the real one, at least as Wilder depicted it, in a little more detail. In By the Shores of Silver Lake, Wilder doesn't linger on the fictional details of the case. We'll see why in just a moment. Mary and Carrie and baby Grace and Ma all had scarlet fever. The doctor had come every day. Pa did not know how he could pay the bill. Far worst of all, the fever had settled in Mary's eyes, and Mary was blind. The real Ingalls girls, Mary, Carrie, and Laura herself, did have scarlet fever, but it struck 3 years before baby Grace was born, as the family moved from Wisconsin to Plum Creek, Minnesota in 1874, in the company of Peter and Eliza Ingalls and their children. Wilder was 7 years old, and according to Pioneer Girl, she suffered more from the illness than her sisters. Sometimes my ears hurt me so much I couldn't play. Ma and Aunt Eliza said it was because of the scarlet fever, that I must have caught a little cold in the moving. One morning my ears hurt so badly I couldn't keep from crying, and Mary and the cousins stood around almost crying from sympathy. This from Pioneer Girl. In fact, scarlet fever had nothing to do with Mary's blindness. One of her attending physicians in Walnut Grove, Minnesota, where the family lived when Mary lost her sight, believed Mary hadn't fully recovered from a bout of measles, which had struck the family when they were still living at the Masters Hotel in Burr Oak, Iowa. As Wilder wrote Lane in 1937, when they were still arguing about character, setting, and plot for By the Shores of Silver Lake, Mary had the measles in Burr Oak, and the illness, they called it brain fever, that caused her blindness was the effects of measles. Wilder devoted only a line or two in Pioneer Girl about that initial bout of measles, but she described Mary's illness later, the one that cost Mary her sight, in much more detail. Mary was taken suddenly sick with a pain in her head and grew worse quickly. She was delirious with an awful fever, and Ma cut off her long, beautiful hair to keep her cooler. The family feared for Mary's life. Then she suffered a stroke. One morning when I looked at her, I saw one side of her face drawn out of shape. Ma said Mary had had a stroke, and as I looked at her, I remembered her oak tree away back in Wisconsin that had been struck by lightning, all down one side. Shortly thereafter, one of her attending physicians made the link between Mary's stroke and the German measles. He said that the nerves of her eyes had the worst of the stroke and were dying, that nothing could be done. They had a long name for her sickness and said it was the results of the measles, from which she had never wholly recovered. So why did Wilder attribute Mary's blindness to scarlet fever? Nothing in the Silver Lake correspondence between Wilder and Lane addresses this question directly. But we do know, as we'll see in the next lecture, that Wilder worried that if she spent too much time in the beginning of By the Shores of Silver Lake on Mary's illness and all the sorrow surrounding it, that readers wouldn't want to read the rest of the book. So here's my educated guess. Wilder probably chose scarlet fever for the fictional version of the story because it was such a deadly disease, and because after arguing with Rose about whether to include Mary's blindness in this book and the remaining novels in the series, Scarlet Fever was a swift, clear, and believable alternative. It's an interesting coincidence, I think, that as Wilder worked on her first YA novel, she chose a disease that figured prominently in the very first American YA novel, Little Women. As you may remember, Beth March contracts scarlet fever from the impoverished Hummel children and never completely recovers from it. As for scarlet fever itself, it was a dreaded and often deadly childhood illness. Charles and Emma Darwin lost an infant son to the disease, and some biographers believe that their daughter Annie also died of scarlet fever. According to some accounts, Helen Keller's blindness was caused by scarlet fever. So Wilder's decision to credit the disease as the cause of Mary's blindness in By the Shores of Silver Lake has literary, cultural, and historical credibility. Still, even after big questions about audience, character, setting, and situation had been decided for in this book, an even trickier editorial decision lay ahead for Wilder as she grappled with the darker, more mature subject matter in this manuscript. We'll take a look at this issue and more in our next lecture on By the Shores of Silver Lake.